The Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game is one of the most strategic, intensely gratifying card games out there, rewarding players with innovative deck building, shrewd technical play, and boundless game knowledge. However, new and aspiring players still face arguably the biggest barrier to entry for competitive play, the extremely steep price points for the most powerful cards available. But what if we tried to remove that barrier? In this series, we're going to be maximizing the value of every penny at our disposal to see how well we can perform on a constrained budget. Each season, we'll be investing a baseline of $50 USD into an affordable deck core comprised of the most cost-effective singles on TCG Player. For just an additional $10 per week, we'll continually expand on that core, transforming our build into the most competitive deck possible. Welcome to Rise of the Budget Duelist. Alright everybody, I am super excited to embark on this brand new journey into the series, and I hope that you're just as excited as I am to go ahead and join us, because we're going to have a lot of fun and it should be a good old time. But the first question we of course have to naturally answer is what deck we're going to be playing in the first place for this series, and you probably already looked at the thumbnail so you could figure it out, but we're going to be going with good old reliable Burning Abyss. So why did I decide to go and play BA for this series? First off, I think it is definitely a pretty good choice as far as meta relevance is concerned. It's had at least some competitive viability since its release back in 2014. It's very famously or infamously known as the deck that will just never die. So I think it's a pretty solid choice for that reason alone. But also, I think it has a lot of flexibility. It's very versatile in its toolbox. It can deal with a wide variety of situations, has aggressive and defensive capabilities, especially with this trap build that we're playing here. So I think that the ability to kind of just pivot based on the metagame will prove to be pretty useful when we're playing this deck for a couple of formats for this series here. And lastly, and possibly most importantly for this series at least, it actually does have, of course, a very cheap deck core, but it also has the potential to improve in terms of its power level. We can buy very expensive cards to kind of help make the deck a lot more competitively relevant in terms of facing off against the meta decks. So I think that this is definitely a very solid candidate for this series. It checks off all of the boxes, and it's one of my personal favorite decks, a fan favorite as well. So hopefully you guys will enjoy watching this deck in action. So we're going to run through the list card by card. I'm going to explain some individual card choices because some of these will have to be explained a little bit. But before we do get started, if you guys are interested in buying any of these cards or want to start your own budget journey, feel free to go ahead and use my TCG Player affiliate link down in the description box below. Additionally, if you do want to actually have access to these episodes a day early, feel free to support me on Patreon as well if you're interested in supporting this series directly. Definitely would help out, and everything that is contributed will go directly back into the channel and the series as well. So let's go and get started with this deck list without any further ado. I should mention, just before we get started real quick, that the rarities you see might not match the lowest rarities or the cheapest rarities on TCG Player, but just know that they're meant to be representations. I generally do own low rarity cards as is, but just thought I would put that one out there in case it wasn't clear. Alright, so starting with the main deck here, we're going to begin with the obligatory 3 copies of Tour Guide from the Underworld. Now, this card, of course, really doesn't require any explanation. She's been a mainstay of the deck pretty much since its inception, and she's just overall a really solid card, able to fetch us our entire engine, and just being a big playmaker makes this one of the best cards in the entire deck. I should mention that if you're playing on a budget, you definitely have to make compromises in terms of power level. So definitely try and find the ways to maximize your biggest win conditions, this definitely being one of them. So for example, some builds that are like super streamlined and optimized might choose to cut down in this card to avoid seeing it in the opening hand so you don't lose to cards like Ash or Imperm or things like that early. But we don't have that luxury, so of course we're just going to max out on our big power plays. So that makes a lot of sense here. Next off, to supplement that, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Fiendish Rhino Warrior. This makes a lot of sense as well because it is another starter card, and also notably because we are going to be grinding quite a bit, this will help us link climb so our BAs don't self-destruct by their own effects, so that's definitely pretty relevant for sure. Also helps send cards like Backjack, which we are playing in this deck. Next up, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Graph. This is what the other 2 kind of starters are going to be fetching us primarily. This is just super solid. Again, being a toolbox to access the entire deck, which is kind of the name of the game so far with these 9 cards right here. Next up for the 3 of BAs, another card that does get us access into everything, which is 3 copies of Skarm. This is really important to play at 3 in this build because it is, again, the trap version. So we're going to be having relatively long games where you're going to resolve 2, even 3 copies of this in a single game. And so making sure that you can always get access to your tour guide turn after turn is super relevant. Additionally, you can also pick up things like Graph in the end phase if you want to utilize your discard traps. So that's definitely something to take note of as well. Next up for the 3 of BAs, we're going to be playing the 3 copies of Farfa. This is a card that we could conceivably cut down to 2 in the future. However, right now I definitely want to stick with 3 because we definitely do not want to run out of interruptions to send off of our Beatrice and things of that nature. So this card is one of the best utility cards in the entire deck. Not too much else to say there. One card that people might expect us to play 3 of that we're actually not going to be is the Seer, which we are playing 2 copies of. So for one, it's one of the more expensive BAs, but actually moreover, this card actually just isn't the greatest to open with, simply because you want to be opening your actual starters more. You can mitigate this because we are playing Gravity Controller in the extra deck, but I figure that that's not enough to actually justify playing this at 3. You find that you're actually going to be prioritizing adding this back off of Dante anyways, so you don't actually need to have a lot of it in your deck to access later on with things like Graph, for example. So I think that just having the 2 is fine, and it really shouldn't be too much of an issue. I'm playing 2 in my regular build as is anyways. Next up, we're playing 1 copy of Libic for just the 1 of utility BAs. This helps kind of ladder up again to Link Climb later on, just to make sure that you, again, don't have your BAs self-destruct. Next up, we get the 1 copy of Alec in cases where Farfa maybe isn't as ideal. It's another name as well. We got the 1 copy of Hcabe, which can help deal with back row, and that's pretty nice for this deck for sure. Just making sure that if we are in a game-winning position, we can just deal with the back row on, like, say, the end phase with the Beatrice, perhaps, and then we can just go for game that way. Also have the 1 copy of the Barbar here. Again, because we kind of lack some aggressive options right now for the time being, Barbar is super useful to us to just get the extra burn damage, especially with the high concentration of BAs that we are playing. And lastly, for the monsters, we're playing the 1 copy of Batjack, which I alluded to earlier. This basically just serves as another interruption by itself. If you're able to, for example, send it off of Fiend Griefing or your Beatrice, this lets you toolbox into the myriad of traps that we play, so that's really, really solid. And then finally, for the honorary monsters, and the only spell in the deck is the 1 copy of Foolish Burial. I'm actually not big in this card, personally, just because using your Graph effect without actually ever summoning to the field is a little bit less efficient, but nevertheless, it is another starter, so it bumps our count up to 10. And this card definitely is super, super valuable just in this budget build where we kind of, again, lack really, really good power plays. So that's going to be it for the monsters and the singular spell card in the deck. We're going to now move into the traps, where, of course, there's going to be quite a lot of them since it is Trap BA. So starting things off with the standard stuff, we're going to be playing 3 copies of Fiend Griefing. This card really is phenomenal because it is both an interruption and an engine card at the same time. So because, again, the meta has a lot of graveyard reliant cards, things like Drytron, for example, or you can shuffle back like Eldritches, things like that. A lot of matchups have things that you can shuffle back reliably with this card, and being able to send stuff like Farfa for extra interruptions, Skarm for follow-ups, or Backjack as well. Just super, super all-star card. Definitely a staple 3 of in this build. Next up, another card that should be a 3 of, but unfortunately we couldn't accommodate 3 for week 1 here, is the Torrential Tribute. So again, this is mostly primarily due to budgeting, because this card, even for the commons, is quite expensive actually. So we're just cutting down this for now. This is one of the first things we're going to try and acquire the 3rd copy of, but super synergistic with BA, high impact trap, really not much else to say there. And then for our discard trap right now, we're actually playing 3 copies of Phoenix Wing Windblast, because surprisingly, Dinomischus and Karmika are both on the more expensive side of things, at least as far as allocations for the budget. I do kind of mention this a lot, but considering the fact that we're trying to spend $50 on 55 cards when you account for your main and the extra deck, that's less than $1 per card. So you really are kind of looking for the most effective replacements of cards until you can get to them later. And that's kind of what this card fulfills. It's actually pretty cool because this card does spin back row as well. So it kind of fulfills a similar role to something like Hcabe, to where if you know you can go for game and you're against like a back row deck, you can definitely just use this to your advantage. So this card, I think, fulfills very similar purposes. And considering the fact that Karmika is like, around $5 or $6, this card might actually stay in the deck even after we pick up Dinomischus. So pretty cool to note there. Next up for the traps, we got 3 copies of Compulsory Evacuation Device. This card's not fantastic, but it is a versatile card, both going first and going second. Helps to kind of break boards a little bit, and it serves as a pretty solid interruption for going first. So I think that this is a pretty fair enough inclusion. And then finally, we got some effect negation traps. So we have 3 copies of Lost Wind and 3 copies of Breakthrough Skill. So these cards are definitely not common to see, especially in modern BA builds, but they at least have some graveyard utility if you do mill them via things like Dante. And furthermore, you can pair them with stuff in the top row mostly, kind of like the mindset behind Torrential plus Strike. Obviously, it's not as good as having Strike, but for their purposes, they're not too bad, and they're, of course, normal traps for Backjack as well. So that is going to conclude things off for this main deck right here. Next up, we're going to move into the extra deck. So starting with the Xyz, we got some pretty standard stuff. We have 2 copies of Dante. The third one kind of was out of budget. I could have probably, tried to have like, if I really wanted to try really hard, I could have fit the 3rd copy in probably, but I think 2 is probably okay for now. If we are ever going to miss a 3rd one, we can always just pick it up later, but I think that having other utility cards in the extra deck is fine as well. So I think this is okay. Again, you'll see how close we got to the $50 mark in this week 1 right here. Or in this week 1 build, I should say. Next up, we got the 1 copy of Beatrice, best card in the extra deck. It does everything we want it to, so she's definitely our primary win condition for sure. We got the 1 copy of Break Sword, definitely super solid utility for going second, able to just kind of break boards. Next up, we got some interesting rank 3s. So we got the Virtual World Shell Jaja. This card is pretty cool because of the fact that it's sort of like DD Warrior Lady that can't be destroyed by battle. It's non-targeting, non-destructive removal, which is super important in a deck that has a lot of targeting effects. So I think this card is pretty good for sure for what it's worth. This is actually one of the options I think would see more play if there weren't, better cards out there right now and if the extra deck space wasn't so tight. But in our build, we definitely are probably going to play this for quite some time. We're playing the 1 copy of Equipped Engineer. This is a card that hasn't seen play in a long time, but the primary reason we're playing it is that it has a quick effect to detach 1. The effect itself is fine. It just basically makes it so that one of your attack position monsters goes to defense position and it can't be destroyed by battle or card effects that turn. But the primary reason we're going for this is that you can put stuff like Fiendish Rhino Warrior or Farfa underneath it and use their effects after your Beatrice gets cleared. So it's like a 2nd copy of Beatrice almost. So it's not amazing as in terms of its own effect, but for what it's worth, it's a pretty decent utility card. Next up, we got the 1 copy of Nightmare Shark. This is probably the funniest card in here. Will this come up? Probably not, but it's there just in case time is a factor, I guess. We have the space for it, and it's a relatively cheap card, so why not? We have the 1 copy of the Fusion Dante or Purple Dante, obviously for when your Beatrice gets cleared. This card is super solid in our build because we're playing, again, a lot of BAs, so we can continuously cycle through them and just dig for traps. So that's what we always want to be searching for, and that is definitely super solid. Also, you just can't be targeted, which is nice, kind of just annoying for our opponents to deal with. We have the 1 copy of Gravity Controller. This card, again, is our sort of seer opening contingency. Also, it can kind of come up if we do want that Grand Mole effect, so not too bad of a card for sure. We have the 1 copy of Carabini, which I actually realized that it's not pronounced Cherubini, it's actually pronounced Carabini. It's going to take a while for me to get used to that, but yeah, Carabini here is pretty good. It has synergy with the Break Sword, of course. You get to pop a card for free, and it's a good turn 2 play or onwards if we want to use a tour guide for more aggressive link plays. So this card is obviously super solid. We have probably the most suspect card in this entire extra deck, which is Geonator Transverser. So we don't have the room to play IP or Verite Anaconda in our budget, obviously with like Dragoon and stuff. That's not happening. So this is our kind of link 2 of choice. If you guys remember back to around 2018 when this deck was prevalent and the combo was ending on like Underclock Beatrice, this is kind of a replacement for Underclock Taker because at least can protect the Beatrice from card effect destruction as well as itself, and it does have a relevant effect for going second if our opponents aren't careful. Will that come up? Probably not. So this is one of the first cards to cut realistically, but for the time being, it's fine for what it is. And then finally for links, we have Nightmares Phoenix and a Unicorn for going second. Super happy these made it in, but unfortunately Cerberus did not make the cut. We'll probably pick that up later sometime down the line. And then we have for our bosses, we got Topologic Bomber Dragon and Zeroboros. These are okay cards. They're not anything like Access Code, but they definitely will do the job for now. Definitely super good for at least pushing damage. So that is it for our 15 card extra deck, and you'll notice that we ran through pretty much 99% of our budget with the main and extra deck. So we do not have a side deck for week 1. So what I'm going to be doing in order to make sure that we bluff our opponents into thinking we have a side deck is to just put in some fun penguin cards right here. We're not actually ever going to side these cards in, but these are going to be our physical side deck. Again, for the purposes of the series, we're just never going to board these in. But these cards are in sleeved, so let's actually go ahead and fix that real fast. And that brings us to these awesome sleeves I actually got in the mail just yesterday. So I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Your Playmat for helping to support this video and the channel. So if you don't know, Your Playmat allows you to actually design your own custom sleeves and playmats if you go to their website. If you go to my description box and use either my code Emanon10YP or just click on the affiliate link, you get to go ahead and get 10% off of your purchases as well, which is super cool. I actually have not tried these sleeves yet, so let's go ahead and do that now. We'll sleeve these 15 cards right here, and then give them a little shuffle, and I will tell you uh, how they are, I guess. So it's super cool. I'm super happy with the way the design turned out. You could see, of course, the signature penguin. I think actually as I was opening them, they were out of the frame there, but yeah, this is super cute. Obviously, you guys know I love penguins, so it's great to have a sleeve that is very signatory of just some of my favorite stuff. So we'll go ahead and just sleeve these up real fast. Also, shoutouts to the new Penguin support that got released last week by the time you guys are seeing this, and also the buyouts of DT Penguin soldiers. Gotta love to see that. But we are just about done here, so let's go ahead and give these a shuffle. They actually feel quite nice just initially, and oh yeah, these are nice actually. It's always nice to open a fresh pack of sleeves, but these are actually really good quality as well, considering that they are custom designed. So super solid stuff. Just did a kind of a mass shuffle. And yeah, these are super nice. Look at these penguins. This is our side deck, by the way. The only time you'll see these cards, hopefully, in the side deck. But yeah, these cards shuffle really well as well. So if you guys, again, do want to go and grab your own custom sleeves, again, check out your playmat, links in the description box below. And huge thank you again for helping to support this video. But with this being said, let's go ahead and hop into locals for week 1. We're going to be doing remote duel locals, so I'm going to recap them via Dueling Book. So I will see you in the commentary section. Alright everybody, welcome to the duel recap section of the video where, as I just mentioned, this is just going to be a review of the games that I played for the remote duel tournament for this episode. Now unfortunately, I actually don't have a very good setup for remote dueling at the moment, so my desk that I normally use for my main PC actually isn't big enough to accommodate remote dueling, so I have to go on a separate desk and use a very old laptop that is simply just not equipped for recording those matches, hence why you're seeing Dueling Book, which to be fair I think is a little bit clearer in most cases to see the cards anyways. So these aren't going to be perfect recreations of the matches by any means, they're simply just going off of memory, but they should give a general idea of how the games went down. Now, I do actually want to move into real life games in the near future, which could be as soon as next week, potentially the next episode after that. Really depends on what I decide to do this weekend. So I have a bit of a dilemma where the LCS is this weekend as I record this video, but I also want to go to locals, which is also Sunday. So let me know in the comments if you would prefer for me to attain the real life footage for next week's episode, or if you would rather me kind of commentate over some LCS matches since they both are happening on the same day, which will be tomorrow by the time you guys see this. So please do let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for that. But let's go and get started with these matches here. So this is going to be round 1. Obviously we're playing BA, but we're up against Shadal, Dogmatic, and Vote here. You can see our hand is not that good. We have a lot of duplicate BAs and 0 traps, even though we play 18 of them. But luckily, at least we do go first since we did win the die roll. So we're going to kick things off with a copy of Foolish Burial, which does actually get ashed. That's not a big deal because we have enough BAs in our hand to play already. So we're just going to normal Scarm, special Farfa, and then go into Dante. Now, I actually elect to not mill here because I want to keep the materials under this Beatrice, which you're going to see I'm going for here. So what this accomplishes is that because we don't have a Link 2 that's really strong to go into, such as IP or Verite Anaconda, we need our Beatrice to actually kind of be our win condition, essentially. So by having the Farfa underneath it, we turn it into 2 interruptions instead of just 1, and it also gets multiple uses this way. This also incidentally plays around Nibiru since it's on 4 summons, and also Ash in case we have to detach like a Farfa and the actual send itself gets stopped. So in the end phase, we're going to trigger our Scarm here. That's going to grab a search for the tour guide, and we're going to pass on this, hoping that Beatrice passes good enough. So our opponent is going to start things off actually by normal summoning Joel, which I found to be a little bit strange, but they're going to go for Almirage and secure Gardner, and this will make sense shortly. So our opponent goes for the Ecclesia, which, I mean, I already had Beatrice up, so that's not the reason they went for this. But they do go for Punishment, and then they revealed that they actually hard drew this copy of Dogmatica Maximus, and that definitely is a problem that I have to deal with right now. So that's going to force my Beatrice. My opponent is going to Fleur de Lis to negate it, but this is what I mentioned earlier, where having Farfa underneath Beatrice is super valuable here, because even though Beatrice is negated, I still get to use the Farfa to just banish the Maximus for the end of the turn. So our opponent actually does clear a Beatrice, which is great news for us since we do get to cycle back some cards and go into Fusion Dante for the very first game of the series, which is super cool. Our opponent's going to set 1 in main phase 2, and then end phase we're going to just cycle through a card and then draw the card we're going to search anyways, which is another copy of Tour Guide. So that's a little bit unfortunate. Our opponent does actually ash our Scarm, which is actually okay since they did know that we had a Tour Guide already. So they could have held the ash for that, but chose not to, so that was fine for us. We draw a Torrential for turn, which is great. We're also going to cycle this Farfar out of hand to draw into another trap, which is what you really want to be doing with Fusion Dante. So super good stuff there. We're going to Farfar away this copy of Fleur-de-Lis, just because 3k body is kind of hard to deal with. And then similarly, we do go into Breaksword to deal with the Maximus. We're going to trigger the graph for this copy of Scarm. And then we're just going to try and clear over whatever board we can. And we're just going to go and pass. Opponent does actually prompt the punishment on the end phase. They chose not to do it earlier, which I found to be interesting. But I guess they just thought I was going to go and pop the punishment with the Breaksword, but I chose not to do that. They're going to go and send Abkalom, which gets their Shadal engine online by sending Hedgehog, and then they're going to go for Scarm, or we're going to go for Scarm rather, and grab Graph in the end phase. So their Fleur-de-Lis comes back, and I'm kind of debating what to do in the draw phase here, because I realize that Hedgehog resolving is going to be bad news since we can't really deal with Schism right now. So I like to actually go for Phoenix Wing Windblast to actually just reset it on top of the deck, because even though Shadal Fusion itself is not live right now, I definitely can't deal with the Schism. So this also prompts Graph that we search because we intentionally set up that way because we had the discard trap. Our Purple Dante does get cleared, unfortunately, but I mean, we at least have some floating bodies in Seer, so it's not that bad. They also set the card to play around the Purple Dante's second effect as well. So we draw a trap for turn. It doesn't really matter what it is because it actually ends up just being discard fodder anyways. We're going to go for our Tour Guide play, which is going to get us a Graph. And then we're just going to lead off into a copy of a Cherubini here, or Carabini. So we're going to go for Graph. We could have done this last turn actually to play around punishment since the Carabini can protect itself as well as whatever it points to. But I elected not to do it because this play I think is greater for the push, which I think was well suited for this turn. So we're going to actually summon Libic off the copy of the Graph there, and then use Carabini to send Seer, which is going to bring back the copy of Scarm from grave. And then we're actually going to link off and go for Nightmare Phoenix just to get rid of the back row to see what it is. And then we also get to trigger Dante. It ended up being actually a Dead Shadal Fusion because they were under punishment, which was fine. But we go into Top Logic Bomber Dragon, and then the Libic self-destructs because there's a non-BA monster in field, and Cherubini is not protecting it, or Carabini, gotta get used to saying that. But we're gonna Libic, summon out Seer, and then the Top Logic Bomber Dragon is just gonna wipe the board, and then we get to actually clear and do some damage. So that's pretty good because the Ecclesia was actually kind of getting big and a bit too difficult for us to deal with. So we're just going to go and grab our Tour Guide in the end phase and then pass. We know our opponent is going to draw Shadal Hedgehog, so he's going to set it and pass. So this presents the way for lethal for us. We draw, we go for Tour Guide, we're going to go Barbar, and this is actually game right here because we're just going to attack over the Hedgehog, attack with our monsters, and then get Barbar into the graveyard for the last remaining burn damage. So game one, we actually do manage to take, which was pretty nice. Game two here, where our opponent does decide to go first, and they do T-set. And we have a lot of BAs again, only one trap card. But I figure that the T-set isn't too threatening as long as we can just kind of play past the singular interruption, or so I thought. But we are going to go for the Fiendish Rhino Warrior here, and then we're going to follow up with a copy of Libic. And then our opponent reveals that they have Super Poly set, so that is definitely bad news for us. Not only does our board get cleared partially, but we do have to deal with Winda now, as well as Squamata getting value, so that definitely is a rough one. They're going to set a copy of Hedgehog, which I actually neglect to attack here, which, I mean, it didn't really make a big difference because the body ends up not mattering a whole ton, but the fact of the matter is that Hedgehog would trigger no matter what, and that's going to get them to Schism, which is not what we want to be dealing with. It's what we tried to avoid last game, but we couldn't do it this time. Meltdown is going to grab Alistair as well, so that engine's online too. To be fair, the Winda is kind of locking them out because there actually are no light monsters in either player's graveyard at the current moment, so they just have to go for an Almirage, and then they're just going to clear our Scarm. Now here's the first time where we forget Scarm in the series. It's happened to every BA player. Every player forgets Scarm at some point. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. We draw for turn. It's the third copy of Rhino, which definitely is unfortunate. Here is actually the bigger misplay that I make, though, besides the Scarm search miss. So I could actually go into Dante here, and I don't think about using my battle phase to clear Winda. I was so fixated on the fact that, oh, you know, even if I breakthrough skill one of these Windas, they have Schism to summon the second. But I could actually just clear the one that I don't negate, and then it'll be fine. As long as, of course, I just hold my interruptions properly, right? So depending on when the schism gets dropped, I could just use the breakthrough skill appropriately, and then we'd be fine to kind of just go for at the very least the Beatrice. But instead, what I do is I just go into battle phase right away, and then I go and try and clear whatever monsters are lingering on my opponent's field, which isn't horrible, but it doesn't deal with the everlasting problem of just Winda being a nuisance. And so that is definitely going to be the biggest misplay of this game for sure. So we go and we try and mill a couple of cards with this Dante, and we go Rhino Warrior to set up a backjack and hopefully try and get some traps to just play for next turn. Our opponent has another copy of Alistair. I didn't break through skill at any point either of these Alistairs just because I figured using it on Window was better, but I ended up not doing that anyways, so that definitely was a misstep as well. Our opponent also had Schism up, so I mean, this is pretty much just the end of the game. They get Shaddoll Fusion to their hand. I do a bit of a cool play where I go for Backjack into Compulse, so that when they go for Shaddoll Fusion, I can just Compulse my Dante, so it doesn't resolve, but it doesn't really change the equation too much. Even though, I do get to trigger some BAs here, it doesn't really matter since my opponent has double Invocation in their hand, which we know about, and they also have the copy of Verite Anaconda. So I don't remember exactly how the game ended, but regardless, I do know that my opponent did win this game because they just had too much board presence, and that actually was the end of game 2. And we're going to siding. Time is called for game 3, so we actually do end up drawing this match 1-1. Okay, so round 2 was a little bit of a doozy here. So we play against Warrocks of all decks, which is definitely not what I expected. And I actually had to read all their cards because, quite honestly, I have no idea what any of those cards did. But anyways, our opponent actually does win the die roll here, and they like to go first. They start off by normal summoning a copy of Warrock Wento, and then they set a back row, and then they end up passing. We draw, and we have a couple of traps finally, which is great for us because honestly, traps are what we want to be drawing. So we're going to go for this copy of Barbar, and we're also going to special summon this copy of Farfar out of hand. Then we're going to go and overlay for Dante. Now, our opponent actually tries to imperm the Dante, even though it's cost. So they kind of just didn't realize that Dante would still get the mills here. But yeah, we're going to go and just resolve our Dante here. It wasn't actually able to attack over the Wento anyways because of Wento's effect, since it can boost itself to be 26, which is obviously bigger than Dante. And I didn't realize this until after I summoned Beatrice in attack position, which was definitely a mistake. So we just kind of forced to pass. I don't want to really crash and summon out Purple Dante just yet. I want to get a bit more mileage out of this Beatrice first. We at the very least get to activate the Scarm and get our search before passing. And our opponent is going to go and summon a couple of bodies here. And this actually does kind of force my Beatrice because I do not want my Beatrice again to get destroyed just yet. So we're going to get rid of the problem, which is Wento, and then send a Backjack, which will help hopefully get into some more traps for later on. But you kind of see that doesn't actually end up being the case. But anyways, our opponent goes into main phase 2. They actually make a copy of Abyss Dweller, which definitely hurts for sure. We do decide to chain the Backjack to the Dweller effect and reveal that the top card was Torrential, which actually doesn't do a lot because for those of you guys who don't know about Warrocks, they all float basically when they get sent to the graveyard via card effect. So that's also why I didn't set this Torrential in my hand, and I kept it as discard fodder for the Wing Blast. But we go ahead and draw for turn. Our opponent is going to Dweller us. We go and Wing Blast the set just to get it out of the way. Set them back a turn. It is another Imperm, which I use on Beatrice, so it does pave the way for this tour guide to go and resolve. Now, even though we can't use the graveyard effects, we do go ahead and just overlay for this copy of Dante right here, and then we're just going to switch our Beatrice to defense. We clear the Dweller, and then we just pass. Our opponent doesn't really have much going for them, so they're going to go and just attack over a Dante, and we add back a copy of Barbar here. And then we're just going to go and trigger Graph. So we get more of an engine online, and we have another Scarm search for next turn as well. We're also going to just Libic at the end phase here using the Beatrice to get another body onto the field. And you can see that between the Dante add-backs, between the Scarm Search, the Beatrice on the board, and our traps is that we have a lot of damage, and we're actually able to go for game with a Carabini push. But what happens after I draw for next turn is that this happens to me in real life. I literally disconnect because my power went out for about 10 or 15 seconds, and I got issued a game loss, unfortunately. It does happen, even though I did have effectively game on board. And the thing was also is that the judge unfortunately couldn't issue us a time extension because it did involve a game loss. So we went into game 2, and basically how game 2 went down was that we had to spend quite a while reading each other's cards since I wasn't familiar with his deck and he wasn't with mine. So we spent a while reading. I did take that game, but we again went into time while siding for game 3, so we drew again. But I guess I can officially say that I've technically lost to Warrocks, even though it was due to a power outage. So that definitely was unfortunate, but that's kind of why I also want to move on from remote dueling as soon as I can. Alright, so moving on into round number 3 here, we're up against another Shaddoll Invoked deck, and games 1 and 2 were pretty interesting. So I take game 1 after being able to out-resource my opponent since they were never able to get their Shaddoll engine online, and then game 2, it was just kind of a painful, slow death to Winda, was never really able to out it. So here we are in game number 3, and this is a pretty interesting opening hand for going first. So if our tour guide resolves, it's great, but if it gets negated, it is not great. So we just kind of have to go for the best, and that's again kind of why I'm not the biggest fan of opening tour guide, but luckily for us, we don't actually get it negated here. So we're able to successfully go into this copy of Graph and then follow up with a Dante, of course. And then we're just going to use the Dante to try and go for some mills. Even though I don't hit anything super relevant, it's fine because I at least get to go for Graph into Seer, and then make the best Link monster in the extra deck, the Geonator Transverser. To be fair, even though I said in the deck profile that it was like super cuttable, looking back on it, I think actually I have to play this card for quite some time since I just need a generic Link 2 that I don't want to, or that I don't mind burning turn 1. For example, I don't really want to invest a Nightmare Phoenix into this play, right? So I'd rather just summon this card, which actually does at least offer some protection. We do go for a copy of Beatrice, obviously, which is nice here, and then we're just going to set a couple of traps and hope that it gets there. Our opponent is going to begin with a Cosmic Cyclone, which gets rid of one of our breakthrough skills, which is kind of unfortunate, but it is what it is. However, they just revealed that they have a Squamata, and they're going to attack into a Geonator. I expected a Super Poly, but they actually just didn't have it, which is good news for us, since that would just completely destroy our board and get their Shaddoll engine online. We elect not to use the Beatrice in the end phase here, simply because I already have Tour Guide, and I figure I could just game my opponent, which I can if I don't mess it up right here. So we draw for turn, and we have a Tour Guide play, and we have game, but we mess it up. So we go for a Graph, and then we go into this copy of Carabini here. And then what I'm supposed to do is, off the Graph, I'm supposed to summon a Libic instead of what I do here, which is Skarm. And so what I'm supposed to do is detach from Beatrice just to get anything into grave, and then trigger the Dante to add back the Seer that was already in my graveyard, which is 1600 attack points, because you're going to see the line that I take is actually 1500 shy of lethal. So when I link away the Libic, I could summon the Seer out of hand with its effects negated, so it stays on board, and then it's the extra damage that I actually need to go for game. But I mess it up, I don't do that. I do all of this, as you can see right here, and we're going to be able to deal 55, but not the last bit of damage. You can see me kind of just realizing that I don't have lethal here. So we're going to go and just do the most damage that we can. I'm still feeling okay about this because we have our Beatrice, and we have a couple of traps, but you're going to see next turn I definitely kind of mind game myself a bit too much here. So our opponent normal summons this Alistair, we're going to break through Skillet, which is great, and then they're going to Eldritch the Golden Lord, target our Beatrice. So my opponent actually said something along the lines of, okay, so you haven't activated anything yet, or you haven't done anything yet. And I saw Triple Tactics Talent in game number 1, so I made the read that they had it, and we're trying to use it. So I do the very dumb play of just not using Beatrice or Dante here. In hindsight, that was very foolish, not only because my opponent could just set this Triple Tactics Talent anyways, and then use it to just summon the Golden Lord from the graveyard, but also because like the cards that they were going to draw off the Triple Tactics Talent didn't really matter, or even if they tried to steal my Top Logic Bomber Dragon, didn't really matter, because I was going to get more value off of those cards that I was going to use with Beatrice and Dante anyways. So not using either of them was just a big mistake. It was respecting Triple Tactics Talent way too much. I should have just played into it. So that's kind of one of the things that I need to work on personally. Sometimes I make the reads and then I just play way too hard around them when I don't really think about the fact that I could just not care about it too much and let my opponent resolve the Triple Tactics Talent, for example. So not only does that just clear my board, it curtails me of any resource follow-up. So that was by far the biggest misplay I made, and I wanted to showcase this one off because it goes to show that the biggest factor a lot of the times is not your deck that's holding you back, it's your misplays. And right here, you can see that I made a ginormous misplay, and that definitely cost me a lot of momentum here. So we're basically both in top deck mode, and it's at this point where it's like 3 minutes or so on the clock. So we both just try and make a bunch of plays as fast as possible. It's really just a simplified game state. I can't remember exactly what happened because I think like 5 or 6 turns pass of just kind of not being able to really apply any meaningful pressure from either side. We go ahead and like we resolve a backjack, for example. We like draw more traps. Our opponent really isn't able to actually get any board presence going. Like we have to use Lost Wind to try and just deal with less damage. Our opponent like tribute sets a beast at some point, and then they like set back row and they like resummon their lord, and then it gets to the point where like I draw for turn, I keep just drawing dead traps, but they keep me alive, so it's not bad. I like, have to compulse the beast, and I'm pretty sure I wing blast it eventually too, but this goes on for a long time, basically until the time runs out. And our opponent was lower on life points, so we actually do manage to scrape that one. I don't really feel like I deserved that victory, to be honest, because I did punt that game, but it kind of just goes to show that this deck really has also kind of a bit of a time issue, which is something that we do have to fix. But that was definitely the round that I think was the most important to show off for sure. So it's time for round 4. We're up against Orcus Eldritch, and let me just tell you, this match was not close. We just got royally destroyed. So opponent does win the die roll here. They're going to like to go first, obviously, and their opening is really, really strong. So they have a Cursed Eldland, which is going to get them a copy of Golden Lord, and they actually are going to be able to pitch a copy of Orcus Crescendo to send away their Cursed Eldland, so now they have both engines fully online and ready to go. We obviously have no hand traps or any way to stop this, so opponent is just going to go for their full play. It's a lot more conservative with this build, of course. It really just is Galatea into Crescendo, but against our deck, that definitely is devastating. Not to mention the fact that they, of course, have both of their, or all of their Orcus engine online as well, or Eldritch engine rather. They actually do have YGO, which they did use. I just forgot it in the replay here. But we do get a tour guide crescendoed. We're going to try and kind of make up for this with some BAs here. But when we go for a Dante, we get Solemn Strike. So we were never winning this game, no matter what, basically. We were just going to go and try and add back and do the best we can. But unfortunately, my opponent has the Cosmic Cyclone, which is going to hit a more impactful back row here as well. So it is not looking too good. They also have a Scarletza here off the YGO, so they use that as well. And between that, as well as all of the Orcus and Eldritch follow-ups, there's just a 0% chance we're winning this game, so we just scoop that one up. Game 2, we go for Foolish as we're going first here, and our graph does in fact get ashed, which really, really is unfortunate, since we did want to have that resolve here. So we're just going to have to go for the kind of contingency play, which is the Gravity Controller line. We do get lucky and mill a backjack, but we're going to shuffle our deck anyway, so stacking our deck doesn't really do anything here, since we do want to, of course, send this copy of Seer off Rhino, and then bring back Dante to go into Beatrice, which, you know, all things considered through Ash is not horrible, but it's going to have to get us there. Our opponent's going to Cosmic Cyclone one copy of our back row, and then they're going to Golden Lord the other one. So all of our back row is now no longer online. Our opponent is going to be able to have both copies of their, or both parts of their engine online again, and that is definitely going to spell bad news for us. We do luckily get to trigger this Beatrice and buy ourselves a turn by sending a copy of Farfa, but realistically, I mean, it's just kind of delaying the inevitable at this point. We do get to at least go into Purple Dante again to try and cycle through more cards, which is fine, but our opponent does have Dingirsu and Conquistador, which don't target, so they have easy ways to out it. Our opponent also has, of course, the Eldritch follow-up in the end phase. We cycle through a card, we get back our Dante, we go for Backjack, and then our Backjack ends up whiffing, which is very, very bad news. We just keep drawing more BAs and not enough traps to deal with the board. We do our best, though. We go for Phoenix, and we try and just force out the Conquistador, even though, again, our opponent just has just way, way more ways than we do to kind of deal with our board. Here, we go ahead and just try and add back resources, and we just try and clear the board as best as we can, but realistically, we're just ending on a Phoenix Pass, and that is not going to be enough. Our opponent does, of course, have Nightmare Engraved still, so they're able to just get back into their Orcus engine, no problem. And they also have their Eldritch stuff. So from here, it's basically just game over. Even though we do have the Lost Wind for Galatea, it's not really going to make a difference. They have Dingirsu to just get back into their Orcus plays for next turn again, so they're just able to grind forever, and we're on borrowed time right now. They are able to also just go into Galatea again, which means that they have another copy of Crescendo set. So we have to deal with Crescendo on one of our plays, as well as Conquistador on a second play, and that is definitely just not going to be good. We know about it, so we're just going to go and scoop it up. Alrighty, so in total, we ended up going 1 win, 1 loss, and 2 draws, which is a very weird record for sure, but definitely not a bad start actually. So I want to have some major key takeaways from this video so we can keep some things in mind for the next episode. So the first thing is the fact that the deck really is lacking offensive options, especially in the extra deck, and as a result, we went into time a lot. And part of that, I guess, is attributable to the remote duel environment, because the matches do tend to feel a little bit slower for remote dueling. I'm not sure if it's just me, but regardless, the deck, just being a trap deck, is naturally very slow. So we do need to fix that sooner rather than later, in my opinion. The second thing is the fact that I'm happy to actually report that a lot of the reasons we lost games was because of technical play and not because of, budget constraints. And that's actually a very good thing for you guys at home because it shows that you guys can actually play very reasonably on a budget and compete with the metagame. It's just you have to really be on top of your game and play optimally. Now, you could definitely see the misplays that I had. I pointed them out where I could, especially in that match 3 there where the read was definitely not managed correctly. So every resource that you mismanage, every kind of read that you misinterpret, or everything that you kind of do incorrectly in general adds up really quickly when you are on a budget because you're already playing from behind. So definitely that's something to keep in mind for the future. And the third thing is the fact that not having a side deck really sucked. I definitely missed having a side deck. It's one of my favorite parts about the game in general. But yeah, it's not being able to decide if you're going first or going second, not being able to be flexible or adapt to various different matchups was a huge hindrance. So that is also something we're going to definitely shore up for next episode as well. But overall, the deck performed actually quite admirably, even though, again, our record wasn't spectacular. I think that the deck is off to a very good start, and we'll be able to just take some things away and improve for next time. But that's going to be it for the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like as well as any thoughts or feedback in the comments. Subscribe for more informative and competitive Yu-Gi-Oh content. If you want to, you can follow me on all social media platforms or support me with links in the description as usual. And until next time, I'll catch you in the next video. See you guys.